the minority leader of the Tobago House of Assembly, Mr. Kelvon Morris, says there needs a rekindling of Tobago-ness in society. Now, to have this conversation, something I've been looking forward to actually, since we spoke last week, Mr. Morris joins me now via the Zoom platform. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, sir, it's certainly a pleasure to have you with us this morning to actually expand on this conversation because you suggested at a call to prayer and thanksgiving service that you have the belief that the island is in need of prayers, and you're calling for Tobagonians to rekindle the Tobago-ness within society. What exactly is the Tobago-ness in society?
Well, when we speak to the Tobago-ness, we are talking about, some intrinsic moral and spiritual values that we hold dear as Tobagonians. In Tobago, there's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And therefore, it means that, it encompasses all of community. It means there are some underlying spiritual values in terms of our fear of God and understanding, right from wrong. It is that ability also where even as a young boy growing up, as I related at that Thanksgiving, there were many Sunday schools, and it mattered not, your religious beliefs or so forth, but you had to go to each and every one of them. And that in itself would have laid the foundation, for the moral fabric of who you were. And therefore that transcended in who you became. And there were certain things that, you would hold throughout your life as fundamental moral and spiritual values that would take you through. So when I compare that to what we are seeing now taking place in Tobago, it has me quite concerned that we no longer carry those kind of, spirituality and morality at the very core. When you look at the schools, I see at very early ages, we are dealing with bullying and all that kind of, and incidents of violence in schools. That has me concerned. When you look at even the crime rate in Tobago and the number of issues of, even now, just last night, I'm seeing we had our third murder for the year. And yes, it might sound as a very small number compared to what goes for the national, but in terms of Tobago, that is quite high. So that is, the Tobago-ness is really those values that really makes us a people that are God-fearing one, and a people that really values right over wrong, good over evil.
Well, Mr. Morris, what, in your opinion, what do you think has caused this erosion of the spiritual and moral fabric within society, especially within the society that is Tobago?
Well, there are multiple factors, in my opinion. One of the main things, and we have to be, if we are to be honest with ourselves, is really deterioration of the family. In terms of, in Tobago, you had it was real. I came, and most Tobagonians really would have been socializing and extended family kind of environment where you had the grandmother playing a very vital role, and then you had your parents, and then you had the support, as I said, of the entire village. So you had the church, you had the schools, and so forth. But now when you look at what goes for in society at this time, you don't have those kind of interactions at that very detailed level anymore. When you look at the home, parents aren't as connected to their children as before. It's even more difficult to get children to attend, as I mentioned, Sunday schools and all that kind of things. So it has been a deterioration of the community and the village that has led to where we are now.
When did Tobago lose its Tobago-ness? Is there a specific point of time that we're speaking of? Or because I know you mentioned that even growing up as a little boy, your experiences and your family values and what you would have done and what your family would have done. But is there, to this particular topic, is there a specific timeline as to when it is Tobago lost its Tobago-ness?
I've not really traced that timeline, but it has deteriorated over time, and it has reached a point to me that is critical. That is what was of concern to me during that call to prayer, that we are now at a critical level that if we do not do something now, then we can reach a point where of no return. And that's why I said we really need to rewire, re-inspire our young people, especially because they are the ones who are going to become the next the next generation of parents, generation of leaders. And if we are not able to inculcate into them or reculture them to what those Tobago values that made us very strong, made us a safe destination, made us a place of productivity, and so forth. If we do not rekindle and rewire that very quickly, then we can be going down a very dangerous path. And that is why I think more than ever, we need to embrace prayer. We need to embrace our faith in our God, in our various religions. We need to have the churches even more involved. We need to get the churches involved in the schools and the education system as well, in a more deliberate, in a more strategic way. And we must not be afraid to talk religion. I mean, we may have different religious beliefs, but we must not be afraid as an island, as a country, to really speak of our various religious beliefs and our faith in God, whoever or in whatever form God may mean to us. We must not be afraid to speak of it, and we must not be afraid to introduce it and have it as part of our governance structure. I recall in that same Thanksgiving and prayer service, one of the main speakers saying that, part of governance and the deterioration of governance is when we remove God from governance. And even if you look at all religious teachings, God has always been a very integral part of leadership. And therefore, we need to also keep that foremost in our minds as we go forward, whether we are political leaders or leaders in whatever sphere in society. We therefore need to have our God involved.
Do you think that some leaders, whether it be political leaders, whether it be leaders within the village, or even leaders within a religious institution or organization, do you think they themselves have forgotten about God or about spirituality, especially when it comes to why it is they're in that position and what it is they're there to do?
Well, over time, I think more and more the church has gotten less and less involved in or in terms of its responsibility to provide that moral and spiritual compass to our nation. And therefore, when you look at even the schools, I remember in a big way, we would have had, well, almost on a daily basis, you had your assembly, you therefore also had your moral education. And when you moved on to secondary school, that was also still a very big part of the curriculum. When you look at in the communities, as I said, the Sunday schools, the churches, they also played a very important part in embracing the entire community. I'm not too sure that still exists in the way it existed before. And therefore, I am making the call this morning on your program that religious leaders of every ilk, really take up the responsibility to become that moral compass and that moral fabric to re-inspire and rewire our young people. Because I'm saying if we allow our young people to get away from us and for other influences to take control, then we as an island and as a country, we are definitely going down a path that is very dangerous and one that is very frightening. And I am calling on the religious leaders of all ilk, of all religious beliefs, for us to take up that mantle and have the church play a significant role in the village that raises the child.
I'm not, by any means trying to take away from your message. I think it's a message everybody can appreciate. It certainly sounds like a carbon copy that the Prime Minister mentioned at the last week with respect to religious leaders. But in that vein as well, moral fabric, shouldn't we also look to leaders of political ilk as well? They themselves, as a young individual, as a young person, I can't say that I've gathered any inspiration from any one of the leaders that I see holding high offices. So if the family home is broken, even if the village life is not what it used to be, I find it very hard to find an avenue to say this is an individual or this is an entity that can be inspirational.
Well, we all have our role to play, and therefore we all need to really take stock and understand that we all shape and influence persons at the end of the day. In my own sphere, sometimes without even knowing, persons are looking at you, persons are inspired by you, and therefore we should always be cognizant of that fact and be leaders and be exemplars in all that we do and all that we say. In terms of the politics, it can become very adversarial at times, and that in itself, kind of takes its own shape, and in some ways will either turn on or turn people off from what transpires at the national level and even at the Tobago level. But at the end of the day, it is all about making sure that we are good citizens in all that we do, in all that we see. And I think that in itself would help persons, would create the environment for more good citizens to come forward.
Well, do you think that we have good citizens leading Trinidad and Tobago?
I think I definitely believe so. I believe that Trinidad and Tobago, for the general part, we have excellent individuals. We have our challenges. We have our challenges, and that is why I've made the call. But at the end of the day, I believe once we all do our part, and I'm talking now, coming back home to the message of us finding our Tobago-ness, finding those values as a country on a whole, because I'm talking now to the entire country. We need to really go back to those values that made us a very productive country, a relatively safe country, and one that, in terms of our human resource potential, we have exported our talents, whether it be through education, through sports, and the likes, culture. We have really been able to export those things to the world, and therefore we just need to really delve down and utilize those formulas in a way that would make it the norm rather than the exception. I saw one in the incoming president, and I applaud her when she encouraged us to take the model, that steel band paniard model, and utilize it as one of the templates to help in terms of rewiring and re-inspiring our youth. Because what it means is that you're looking at things that have worked, you're looking at systems that have been successful, and you're now trying to transpose those systems across, in a more broad and more on a larger scale, so that we can get the same kind of benefits. And therefore, that is what we need to do as a country. Look at the success stories, look to the things that have worked. And we are not trying to reinvent the wheel, but what we're going to do, or what we should be doing, is really ensuring that those templates and those models they're tweaked to the specific environment, specific culture, and specific circumstances.
Well, I'm quoting directly from you now at this particular prayer and thanksgiving service. You said, "We tend to believe that whatever success, whatever achievement, it is of our very own, and we forget the man in whom this was made possible. We forget what we were supposed to do in that very moment, and we forget why we were chosen." Can you name, as an example, a leader who has not forgotten why they were chosen, or for what purpose they were chosen?
Well, I was speaking very general, but I'm sure as we look around the leadership on a whole, you would see that, a lot of people come in with good intentions, and once they attain high office, then you wonder what really happened to that person. Even in Tobago, as we stand right now, many persons, you see the current leader was even referred to the Tobago saltfish in terms, and not in a derogatory way, but meaning that he came in very popular and that kind of thing. And people liked him because they saw certain qualities they believed that would, redound to the benefit of Tobago. And now when you look 1 year and 3 months later, Tobagonians are basically experiencing buyer's remorse. They are the person they believe that they elected is a completely different person. They thought they would have had somebody very grounded, somebody in touch, somebody they can reach. When you listen to the highest of leaders, persons like the Dr. Vanas James and the Mr. Hochoy Charles, they're saying they cannot reach this leader. They cannot. He's no longer taking their advice. All the time he was listening to them, but now he's doing his own thing. He's no longer listening. He's no longer taking calls. People can't find him. He's not keeping up to his promises. So that is one example, prime example, very current, where you see persons, are promoted, and then they become their own man. They become their own way, and in some ways, they do not deliver on the expectations of the people.
Mm-hmm. Fair point and received, but I see you refrained from speaking from a national level, which is fair.
Not at all. And I mean, we've seen it in the past. We've seen leaders being promoted, and that's why I said oftentimes leaders are promoted and they are also demoted, because when you get an opportunity to serve, ultimately that authority, that opportunity is really to serve the people. And when you forget about the people and you no longer seek their interests, then over and over, we've seen governments come and governments go. And ultimately, we as leaders, we need to remember that if we don't do the bidding of the people, then the people will eventually deal with us.
Well, Mr. Morris, I want to thank you for joining us. One final question this morning in this interview, and it's a conversation I've looked forward to following last week's prayer and Thanksgiving meeting. Trying to get a better understanding of the Tobago-ness in society. I think I do.
Yes.
Would you say that the most influential and I suppose the most powerful leader here in Tobago, by extension the Prime Minister, who's a Tobagonian himself, is he an example of Tobago-ness? Is he, does he practice Tobago-ness in society? Based off of your explanations this morning.
Well, one of a very strong Tobago quality is, our strength, and this leader, or forthrightness as well. And we've seen our Prime Minister make decisions that many would have questioned, but he, regardless of the outcome, did it for what he considered to be the best interests of the country. We've seen it with Petrotrin. A number of persons would have said that was political suicide to even consider, restructuring Petrotrin. And it has proven over time to be a very brave and a decision that has benefited the country in many ways. When we look at the Dragon Gas deal, Many naysayers were saying that it would never happen. Many naysayers were saying that, this was a waste of time and even call for sanctions when we continue to pursue. And now we are seeing that this Dragon gas deal has reached an advanced stage where, both Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela stands to benefit. When you look at even following the money in terms of corruption, and many persons were saying you're spending all this legal fee on matters that are 20 years, and now you're seeing that we have a judgment where we are poised to basically recoup over 1 billion TT dollars. So yes, I would say our Prime Minister has shown great strength and great fortitude, and that is something that we hold dear as Tobagonians.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly want to thank you for your time this morning and your presence on AM Prime. I'm only sorry this is where we'll have to conclude this morning's discussion.
It's always a pleasure, though.
But your message overall, as it relates to Tobago-ness in society, is very much received. And thank you very much for your time.
You're most welcome.